What if you had an endless supply of your absolute favorite thing in the world? For one dog, that was pretty much his reality. But what happens when having everything isn't quite enough? Let's get into the story of the greedy dog.
So our story kicks off in this busy little town, and right at the heart of it is a dog named Bailey. Now, Bailey had basically won the dog lottery because he lived with a butcher, you can just imagine. This meant a life of pure luxury, with a constant glorious supply of these delicious chunky bones.
But this life of having everything had let's call it an interesting effect on his personality. Bailey guarded every single scrap he got with this fierce jealousy. I mean, if another animal even looked his way, he'd bark. If they dared to get any closer, he'd growl. And if that didn't work, he wasn't afraid to bite. The word sharing just wasn't in his vocabulary. His daily routine was always the same. He'd get a fresh bone from his master, a few nice scratches on the head, and then Bailey would disappear into the alley behind the shop to just chew and chew and chew, all by himself. It was a plump, lazy life, and it suited him just fine. Until one day, his perfect little world got interrupted. So on this particular day, Bailey had just gotten settled in with his big beef bone when a visitor showed up. It was a scruffy, orange stray cat with these wild whiskers and zigzaggy stripes, just kind of batting a ball of yarn around like she didn't have a care in the world.
Well, Bailey immediately starts barking, of course, but this cat was quick. She just leaps up onto a chain-link fence, way out of his reach. She prowls along the top of the fence, sniffs the air, and purrs. "Surely you could share a little."
Oh, Bailey was having none of that. He lets out this low growl, hugs the bone tight between his paws, and snarls, "This is my bone and I don't share." He decided his quiet spot was officially ruined, so with one last nasty bark, he snatched up his prize and just marched right out of the alley. So off he goes, marching down the street, through a parking lot, and eventually he finds what seems like the perfect spot, a quiet, vacant lot with a high plywood fence all around it. Finally, he's thinking, I can eat my bone in peace. He gets maybe a few glorious minutes of uninterrupted chewing before a voice echoes from a nearby garbage can. The lid rattles and out hops a pretty tubby raccoon with these bright, eager eyes fixed squarely on Bailey's bone.
The raccoon just gracefully hops up onto a dumpster, clears his throat, and in this surprisingly formal tone, he asks, "I was merely inquiring as to whether you'd be interested in sharing that magnificent meaty bone with a fellow enthusiast."
Bailey's response this time was even sharper. "It's my bone, and I don't share," he growled. "Now keep moving, you chunky trash panda." And totally ignoring the raccoon's offended little huffs, Bailey snatched his bone and stormed off once again. So his quest for a peaceful chewing spot continues. He marches through a nice park until he gets to this quiet little pond. He settles down right there by the water's edge and says to himself, "No more interruptions. It's time to eat." He starts to chew happily, but of course, it wasn't long before another voice piped up. This time, it's a chubby duck, just floating on the water nearby. She has this playful smile and a single feather sticking straight up from her head, which made her look just a little bit silly. "Wow, what a treat," she quacked. Bailey's warning growl went completely unnoticed. The duck, just bobbing happily, offered him a trade. "I could get you some lovely stale bread." Or, "How about some stale bread?" "Ooh, I bet if I look really hard, I could find you some stale bread." Bailey just sighed. This place wasn't going to work either. He was too frustrated to even chase the duck. He simply picked up his bone and marched away again, this time making his way onto a small footbridge that crossed over the pond. And this is where his afternoon took a very dramatic turn. As he's crossing the bridge, he looks down into the water and sees another dog looking right back up at him. A big, shaggy dog, holding a bone that looked just like his. And of course, he's thinking, it must be after my bone. Well, that was it. Enough was enough. This was the final straw. Bailey decided he was going to scare this intruder off once and for all. So he did what he did best. He barked. But there was a critical flaw in his plan. The other dog wasn't a dog at all. It was his own reflection. And as Bailey opened his mouth to unleash his mightiest bark, he completely forgot about the precious bone he was holding. And it was too late. The bone tumbled right from his jaw, bounced once on the wooden edge of the bridge, and then, splash, it vanished into the deep water below, sinking fast, right out of sight. Just then, that silly-looking duck floated over. In his desperation, Bailey pleaded with her to dive for the bone. The duck, well, she reminded him about how he wasn't so willing to share earlier. After a moment of painful hesitation, Bailey finally caved. "Okay, fine," he sighed. "If you help me get it, I'll share it with you." The duck dove down, but she came back up empty-beaked. The bone was just too heavy.
Then, Bailey had an idea. He realized he needed help. Specifically, he needed clever hands. So he raced back to the vacant lot, found the raccoon, and sincerely apologized for his rude insult. Then, he sped to the alley, found the cat, and apologized for his greed. He made them both the same offer. Help me get my bone back, and it's ours to share. Impressed by Bailey's change of heart, the raccoon came up with a brilliant plan. First, the cat offered up her ball of yarn for string. Next, the raccoon used his nimble paws to tie a perfect loop. Then, the duck took the loop in her beak, dove deep, and skillfully slipped it right over the sunken bone. Finally, Bailey grabbed the end of his string in his mouth and gave a mighty tug. The bone shot out of the water like a glistening fish, landed on the bridge, and rolled right onto the shore. "Hooray!" they all cheered.
And right there on the shore of the pond, the four of them sat down together.
And from that day on, Bailey's lonely routine was a thing of the past. Every morning he'd still get his bone from the butcher, but instead of hiding away, he'd meet up with the cat, pick up the raccoon, and they'd all head to the pond. And there the four of them would have a picnic with the duck, sharing not just their food, but their newfound friendship.